evening, Bulls fans. I am, as always, Matt Gritzmacher with UBBullRun.com. It is Sunday night, so of the Olympic Sports Rundown, where we talk about all of UB's non-football, non-basketball sports. Kind of slowing down. It's going to be a abbreviated show for sure this week. I'm back without John. He's been in and out the last couple of weeks. He's got a midterm tomorrow, so that's obviously more important. We're really seeing fall season slow down, and spoiler alert, unlike last year, we won't have women's soccer going into the middle of November. So after this coming weekend, it's going to be pretty much swimming and wrestling, and even swimming only competes once in November until January. It's basically going to be wrestling for this type of stuff until January, when track and tennis get going. This past weekend, we had a mostly just the big three, both soccer teams and volleyball, and then we'll talk about them. We'll preview wrestling I'll say what I can about wrestling without John. Talk about wrestling who's headed to the Northeast Duels this coming weekend. And that's kind of the whole show. Men's soccer regular season is wrapped up. Women's soccer postseason is wrapped up. Volleyball's got one more weekend of the regular season. They will be headed to the postseason. Cross country is headed to the NCAA Northeast Regionals this coming weekend. That's good news. There's not much of a preview to do there, but we will mention it. And other than that, we're kind of slowing down, barring an amazing performance from cross country, a very long shot performance from volleyball over the next few weekends, or a slightly less long shot but still long shot showing from men's soccer next weekend. The fall sports are all going to be done over the course of the next 6 or 10 days, I suppose. Volleyball will be the last one standing, most likely. The tennis teams have already wrapped up. Rowing, I don't think this was on the schedule, but they competed for the last time this past weekend. We'll cover that. And then swimming's got one competition the weekend before Thanksgiving. And then I don't think they do anything in December. Nope. And then we wait till January. Whereas wrestling competes twice more in November and quite a bit in December. They've got a couple of duels in December. So for the rest of the year, it's going to be abbreviated shows. It's not going to be a lot to talk about. I can make it. We'll talk more about wrestling. If not, we'll talk to the extent that I can. I might also this week talk about incoming recruits. National Signing Day, early signing period is November 11th. That's for all sports except for football and soccer and men's water polo, which UB doesn't field a team in. The football National Signing Day in early February gets most of the attention because that day's football gets most of the attention. But all these other sports, seniors can sign national letters of intent to come to UB or any other school if they wanted, starting this Wednesday, and there's a week-long period for that. The most highly visible names among them are basketball players, but you can get that for all the other sports too. Men's basketball has a 4-man class that we think competes favorably for the best class that UB's ever brought in. The women only have one senior this year, so they've just got one player coming in. You can go on the blog and find old articles about all of them, or you can wait until Wednesday when we'll be talking about them again. So I suppose since it's going to be a short show, I'll bring up that, talk a little bit about the recruiting that's coming in. I'll have to make up screens on that, but not a lot going on right now. Mostly the big fall sports are wrapping up. I'll start with women's soccer. It's been clear all year that women's soccer, not the same team as last year. It's not a huge surprise. It's not something to be ashamed of. They lost 4 senior starters up and down the formation, and they had a bit of a rocky start both to the regular season and to MAC play. In the end, 2 early season losses to Ohio and Bowling Green that were very out of character didn't hurt them at all. They would have finished third, losing to Western Michigan by a tiebreaker rather than by a couple games in the conference regardless. The Bulls had the semifinals and finals of the MAC tournament were this weekend. Bulls on Friday went to Western Michigan, who has the highest remaining seed, was hosting the final 2 rounds. WMU had been the champion in 2013 before UB won last year in the final over Western Michigan. So this weekend was kind of a competition to see who might have a multi-year run here. Buffalo's result that they could compete with any of the top teams in the MAC, but they didn't bring the consistency all year to establish themselves as a top team. They fell to Ball State in overtime. They drew Western Michigan after taking the lead, and they beat Miami 1-0 in overtime, and they beat Kent State 1-0. So there wasn't a lot of stratification between kind of the teams there. I think Kent State and Miami had a few more uncharacteristic slip-ups than UB, and that's why the Bulls were able to stay in front of them. But they had to go on the road to Western Michigan, played a game that was really reminiscent of last year's final. It was a very physical game. Western Michigan likes to play physical. They like to throw their weight around, and just like last year's final, I think the refereeing was a little lopsided. I don't think it determined the game, but I think that Western Michigan has become very accustomed to a style of play, and UB isn't, and so it just kind of shines through when UB's trying to play a little out of character, and I think Western Michigan got the benefit of the doubt in a few spots. In general, watching the game, you might see that Western Michigan had more possession and feel like UB was hanging on, but I didn't feel that way at all. I felt it was a very even game. UB was willing to let Western Michigan have possession, but in doing so, Buffalo was able to maintain their defensive shape. They were able to play responsible defense, and I felt that the Broncos really only had two very dangerous chances on the game, and the second one was the one they scored the game-winning goal in the 85th, 86th minute to push them through to the championship. But I thought that UB, with fewer chances, but not monumentally fewer chances, generally had the more dangerous looks on the day. I think Cassidy Kidd had chances to score 3 different goals in the first 15 minutes. She had another chance in the first 10 minutes of the second half. That was probably the best chance for either team all game. It was just a game where there were chances to finish. They weren't grade A chances. They weren't amazing. A tight, tough game between two very defensively responsible teams. And Western Michigan is more consistent all year through the MAC season. Their coach won MAC Coach of the Year, announced earlier in the week. And the women are out. They don't repeat their championship, and they finish their season 2 games earlier than last year. I'm not wildly worked up about it. I am disappointed. I would have loved another championship, especially after Akron upset Ball State on the other side. Western Michigan beat Miami in the championship today 2-0. But, you look at kind of the losses that UB had to graduation last year, and especially with the early season ups and downs, kind of felt, all right, this year it's going to be a different season. It's very rare for someone to go undefeated in the MAC as Buffalo did last year. They were only the 3rd team ever to do it. And a second straight run of the MAC semifinals is unprecedented in UB history. It was only their 4th ever appearance in the conference semifinals, which over a 17-year time in the conference that's pretty good. They previously did it in 2001, I believe, and 2011. So this is something that prior to Schonberg taking over, it only happened once a decade. Now he's done it twice in 2 years. They finished with 11 wins this season, combined with last year's 16. That's 27 wins over the last 2 years. That matches a program high set over 1999 and 2000 in their early years of the MAC. So that's something that has only happened twice in the last 15 years, once every 15 years. Individually, Laura Dougal finishes the season still tied for number 1 all-time at UB in career shutouts. She's just finished her sophomore season. She'll break that record, most likely, I would say, before September hits next year. She is also tied for number 2 all-time at UB in wins with, I believe, 27. I believe the record holder is 34. So there's a good shot that she breaks that record before the middle of the season next year when UB comes back. We'll talk more about women's soccer and kind of the off-season and a post coming ahead, but they graduate a handful of seniors, 3 starters, Cassidy Kidd, who had been a midfielder much of her career, switched to forward and had scoring, was named for MAC. Jackie Hall, who was named MAC Defensive Player of the Year as a junior, 3rd team All-America, was named 1st team All-MAC this season. Kristen Markovitz, who was named to the MAC All-Freshman team as a freshman, obviously was part of kind of these other position switches, both early in the year, moved up in the formation to an unfamiliar position to try and give UB some more flexibility. Midway through the season, flipped back, and that really sparked UB. So that's in Hall and Markovich. It's the middle of UB's defense has gone both on the back line. Last year, They lost Sophie Therian and Courtney Mann. This year it's Hall and Markovich. And in 2 years, the middle of the defense is going to be really gutted twice. And so next year is going to be a year won and lost in the midfield. And for reasons I'll talk about later, I think that's not a bad place to be. And also Mackenzie White, backup goaltender, who had appeared in a few games as a freshman, missed a ton of time to injuries and lots of very painful surgeries, real inspirational story. She's not a huge loss to the lineup, but she has graduated. And then Nadia Johnson, who also missed a bunch of time to illness, was in a very frequently used substitute role this year, very similar to Megan Abman in 2014. There's always going to be kind of a forward sub available. She did get a goal this year, which is very nice to see. She and Cassidy Kidd were very much emotional leaders of this team, from what you could tell. And that's probably going to be just as big a loss as you'll see on the field. So for the second straight year, UB loses a sizable senior class. But I think it'll be. I think UB's in better shape coming into 2016 than they were coming into 2015. They still made it to the MAC semifinal. So their season ends with a 1-0 loss at Western Michigan. Still in the midst of one of the best run in program history, really, and they look very strong. They don't look like they're slowing down at all next year. Julia Bonatti and Selena Carrero both look better this year than last year. Some real important freshmen contributing both as subs and as starters, and I will talk about it more later. Men's soccer season is not over. They did finish their regular season also with a 1-0 loss to Western Michigan in Western Michigan. Not my favorite weekend. I don't really like Western Michigan to begin with across the board, and this wasn't a friendly weekend for that. The good news is that I suspect that there wasn't much put into this. Actually, I shouldn't say that. That downplays it. We already knew going into this game that UB was, barring some very unlikely results from the other games in the MAC, UB was going to face Western Michigan in the conference semifinal this coming weekend anyway. So I was never putting much stock into this game. The difference would be, will UB be 2 or will UB be 3? And because the men's tournament is only 4 teams, the previous champion, or perhaps it's the regular season title holder, and either way, it's Akron. It's always Akron. Hosts the semifinals and the finals. So UB, barring something very strange, was going to be playing Western Michigan in the semifinal this coming weekend anyway. I was very encouraged by their 1-0 loss to the Broncos. I think the Broncos have really shown this season to be the clear number 2 team in the conference. They had a slip up towards the ends of non-conference play and the beginning of MAC play that hurt their standing nationally, but there was a time where both Akron and Western Michigan were ranked this season. They're a very good team. I believe they returned all 11 starters from last year to start this season. It showed. They have the top defense in the MAC. They're giving up less than half a goal per game. UB has the second defense in the MAC, although I suspect if Akron didn't play such a gauntlet of the schedule, statistically they'd be ahead of the Bulls. And UB in this game, which inconsequential for standings purposes, held Western Michigan without a goal in the run of play. They were outplayed a bit by Western Michigan, but they were able to get some chances. The Broncos scored a goal in the 18th minute off a free kick, a long free kick, 45 yards out, that hit Joe Kuda in the hands and somehow still made it in. I wasn't able to watch the video at that time, but that was the only goal of the match. I was watching the second half, and UB was able to press forward as they do around the 60th minute under Stu Riddle. It seems for 2 years now they've always been able to get some momentum and press through in the, with half an hour to go. They were to get some chances. They sometimes seem to rely on long balls and hopeful crosses rather than some build-up play when they fall behind. And I don't love watching that. I'd like to see them try to build up. So the result of this is UB had some dangerous stretches of possession. They had some balls in the box that could have been headed on. And they, out of all that, aren't necessarily credited with too many shots on goal. But they did have possession. They were more responsible on defense. And Steven Stryker and Scott Doney nearly scored very late. There were a couple other, in the run-up to the final couple minutes, or a couple other chances. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were holding something back, knowing that they were most likely facing the Broncos again. I hesitate to say that they view it the same way that I do, but I wouldn't be surprised if Stu Riddle has some tricks up his sleeve or stuff. UB still finishes with, actually, let me not go there. that loss means very little standings-wise. Looking around the conference individually, prior to the semifinals next week, we should get the postseason awards, as we did for women's soccer this past week, which I should backtrack. I mentioned that Cassie Kidd and Jackie Hall were first-team All-MAC. Julia Bonatti and Selena Carrero were named second-team All-MAC in addition, and Brianna Shingary, in the least surprising award ever, was named to the MAC All-Freshman team. I was not necessarily surprised to not see Laura Dougal make All-MAC at goaltender. She had a tougher season last season, but I was very surprised to see Akron's goaltender, Annabelle Hegeman is her last name, make second-team All-MAC. I thought that Miami's Vic Maniaci, who led the conference in shutouts and in goals against average, would get that spot. In addition to her, there's also Western Michigan's Stephanie Heber and Dougal. Ball State's Alyssa Heinschel got first-team All-MAC, which is not a terrible surprise, but she also faced the fewest shots in the conference behind Ball State's defense. Little bit surprised to not see Dougal or Maniaci, really, but UB still had five players, from the women's team make All-MAC. Back on track with the men, those teams will be announced. They should be announced this Thursday if they follow the same schedule. On the men's side, they do still do 2 All-MAC teams, even though there's only 6 teams. I would expect Russell Cicerone to not only be first-team All-MAC for the third time in his career, I would also expect him to be MAC Player of the Year. He leads the conference in goals and points, and he's second in assists. Richie Laria and Adam Najem from Akron are perhaps more highly regarded, or correctly or incorrectly, that's the fact, but neither of them quite put together a statistical season that Russ did. You look at Russ's game-winning goals, you look at some of his shots off free kicks, and you just watch games and know the teams are double-teaming him all the time and always marking him with 2 guys, and he's still able to produce the way he did. He's not only in the top of the lists in the MAC, but he's top 5 in a number of categories nationally. And the coaches are smart. The coaches vote on him, and they're smart. He was a must-see player every single game this year. He was a must-see player every single game last year. He's only a junior. He should win MAC Player of the Year. He'll almost certainly be MAC All-First Team. I could also see Marcus Hansen make MAC second team. He had a very high number of assists, as did Scott Doney. I don't think that Joe Kuda, he didn't play enough to get All-MAC honoree, especially with Western Michigan's goalie Drew Shepard, and Akron's goalie is plenty good as well. But he played very well. If he had played more games, he might have a case. Flock Slotmaker, I would expect to be All-MAC in some capacity at center back for UB. He played a real big role everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised to see 3 or 4 bowls. I would bet that it's Cicerone, Slotmaker, and Hansen are the big 3. I wouldn't be surprised to see only one of Hansen and Fox. I wouldn't be surprised to see those 2 and maybe someone else. I'm not sure who it would be. But they are, as I've referenced, in the MAC tournament. That's their first appearance since 2011. That game is against Western Michigan, and it will be in Akron. So their regular season is done. By this time that we're talking again next week, we'll have updates on them and how they've done. And I'm really pleased for that. I've been saying all fall that UB really needed to make the MAC tournament this year. They've got a team that's very sophomore and junior loaded this season. Russ Cicerone's a junior. Next year is the year. Next year is Stu Riddle's 4th year. And not that he hasn't clearly improved the program, but he's got this huge crop of imbalanced, roster distribution, class size distribution. Next year is kind of is the year where they should peak. And then the senior class is going to go, and there's going to be some turnover. And so I really wanted to see UB in the MAC tournament this year, so they got a taste of the postseason and knew what to expect. Next year, when I expect them to, it's tough to ever expect someone to compete with Akron, but I expect them to be favored in most of their matches next year. And so I'm very glad they made the MAC tournament. The other big kind of fall sport is volleyball, who we really haven't said enough good things about volleyball this season. We haven't said, we've talked about how they've turned their season around, turned it around. They've improved mid-season. They started to string some wins together after it looked like they might honestly have a winless season. Freshmen are stepping up. They've dealt with some very significant injuries. we haven't given them enough credit. Volleyball right now, they once again split their 1-1. They split their opening 2 weekends, had a bit of a losing streak, and then won 3 straight on the road, and have now split 2 weekends in a row, and now they're 6-8 in conference, thanks to their own wins and some help from around the conference. Which really what Buffalo's done is has beaten all five schools below them. Not only are they 6-8, but they're sitting 7th right now. They've beaten all 5. They've beaten who they need to beat to sit 7th in the conference. That's exactly what they're doing. If you know your history, or maybe you've listened to me say that it's 6 wins is the most that UB's before, including last season. And they've clinched now a spot in the MAC tournament, and that's only the second time they've done it after they went last season as the 8th seed. That 8th seed was the highest they'd ever finished in conference, and this year they're set to match that at absolute worst. And last year we were talking about how Reed Sunahar had done a very good job because he took over after the dismissal of Todd Kress and brought in his guys and his ladies, and still brought the team through turmoil to their best year ever. They had strong back-to-back winning seasons together. This year's not a winning season, but the offseason was even more tumultuous. Reed Sunahar left. Talia Bishop, who had a year of eligibility left, she left. Sable Stoller graduated. Skylar Day left. Really, UB lost a lot of pieces, and Blair Brown Lipsitz comes in, a first-time head coach, only a couple years older than the student athletes. Lots of freshmen who, after a couple weeks in the season started playing plenty. That's been lost to injury for a long time. And UB's within the MAC has matched their best every year, and they've got 2 more games to improve on it and set a new high. They're sitting at tied for 7th in the conference right now, winning the tiebreaker over Central Michigan. With a little bit of luck, they may finish 7th, which would be a new high. I have not said enough in praise of both Coach Brown Lipsitz and the team as a whole. We just kind of talked about how they've done and been excited that they're improving. Their current state comes this weekend. I mentioned they split. They won the one they were supposed to, and they lost the one that we expect them to lose. And that's not a huge surprise for where this team is, but it's very good news that kind of the wins, they've eked out 2 close wins, and they've beaten the teams below them with one exception, the way they should. And that's how you get in the tournament and how you distinguish yourself against other teams in your area. So Friday night, they hosted Bowling Green and beat them 3-1. Their only set they lost 24-26. Not UB's best game, but they had improving offense throughout. They ended up hitting 217 for the match, which is well above their season average. And really, what we're seeing in UB this year all came through in this match against Bowling Green. Madison Clark, freshman, has been subbing in at setter for Marissa Prinsback in 4 sets. She had 50 assists, which is, I believe, if not a season high for her, certainly a season high for a 4-set match. She had a double-double with 10 digs. 3 other players had double-digit digs. I talked a lot early in the season and preseason about how Megan Lipsky really needed to step up and be a game-in and game-out performer for UB. She had another huge day with 20 kills and 16 digs. I believe that matched her career high for the season. If not, actually, let me check. It might not have, but I think it's only the second or third time she's hit 20 digs this season. Cassie Shadow's been unstoppable both on offense and defense. She had 14 kills and 7 blocks. I believe she's the top blocker in the MAC now. We're kind of chattering on our own site about her case for Defensive Player of the Year. She's put up double-digit blocks a couple of times once this season, but she's the leading blocker in the MAC. Megan Wernette continues to hit at middle blocker on the right side for a very high percentage. Against Bowling Green, she had 7 kills against just 1 error. And really, for UB, it's just a match that they were supposed to win. They went out to 1, and they minimized mistakes doing it, and they didn't play perfectly. All of the 3 final sets were closer, even as UB's offense improved from set to set over the match. They dropped the second one to Bowling Green 24-26. And then in the third set was very close too. They won 25-23, but they had trailed 15-13 before kind of using a late run to take a lead, and then they had to hold on. They were up. They trailed even 23-22, and then won 3 straight points to win the third set. The fourth set, they fell down 6-0, and that's really critical. If you fall down, they were up 2-1. The fourth set, they fell down 6-0. If you lose that fourth going into the fifth, UB's won their fifth sets in MAC play this year, but they had a couple of fifth sets in out-of-conference play where they jumped out to a 2-0 lead and lost all the momentum coming out. They fell down 6-0 in the fourth set and were down even 16-11 before they kind of mounted a run. And then they got to 2017 and then were slipped back to 2020, and they're able to really put Bowling Green away at the end. And that's, like I said, it's nothing super wonderful to beat Bowling Green, but for a team so young, frequently has 4 freshmen on the floor, that's a win they needed to get. And with that win, they really essentially sealed their spot in the MAC tournament, which is it's a rare thing, especially with the new format of the MAC tournament for the women to be there. To finish in the top 8 was unprecedented before last year, and now it's happened 2 years in a row. They didn't quite clinch it with Friday, but with that combined with an Eastern Michigan loss on Thursday, the magic number, as we might say, was down to 1. With just one remaining Buffalo win or Eastern Michigan loss over the final 3 matches, and UB would be in. That came in handy on Saturday night because UB brought in Miami, Miami, Kent State, and Ohio are all up at the top of the MAC in the East. And UB's benefited from getting 2 matches against Akron and Bowling Green, who are at the very bottom of the conference. And Miami really dusted UB without too much trouble. I don't have a lot to say on this one. Miami won 25-19, 25-22, 25-10. Miami's got a very good outside hitter in Paige Hill and a 6'5" middle blocker in Jenny Engel. And those two combined for 25 kills with just 1 error on 34 swings. If you allow 2 players to hit 700, you're not going to win. You're not even going to win a set, and that's what happened. And this wasn't a terribly surprising result. It would be great to see UB pull one upset. Right now all of their wins are to teams below them. But if you beat everyone below you, that's okay. That's a steady team. You know what you're getting, and it's getting them into the MAC tournament. At the same time that this was happening, Kent State did beat Eastern Michigan, so UB's in. And other good news is that Ohio beat Central Michigan. So UB heads into the final weekend, as I've said, in 7th. They're tied with Central Michigan at 6-8 in conference with 2 matches left to play for both teams. UB's got the tiebreaker on the Chippewas. As long as they match the Chippewas this weekend, they'll head into the conference tournament at the 7th seed, which would be a new program high. Now, Central Michigan does have Toledo among their final 2 games, which is Toledo's one of the worst teams in the conference, whereas UB travels on the road to play Kent State and Ohio, who I believe are now tied for first. Ohio's really slipped. Kent State might be a game back. Either way, UB's going to some front runners while Central Michigan has to deal against Toledo. And if CMU wins 1 more game, whether it's 2 or 1, then Buffalo wins this weekend, they'll move into 7th, and UB will be 8th. And given that they have Toledo, I think that's what will likely happen. But there's still the chance. There's still a chance they finish there. It's kind of everything for volleyball. We'll talk next week both about their matches against Kent State and Ohio and their matchup for the MAC tournament, which we will know before our show next week. Last year, UB, I believe, played Western Michigan in the first round of the MAC tournament, and the Broncos went on to win the whole thing and ended up playing Wisconsin in the NCAA tournament. They upset Ohio in the MAC championship, and they upset Miami in the semifinal. So, UB last year got a taste of the tournament, and now this year they've got a lot of freshmen who get another taste, and they're setting themselves up. Those are really the big 3. Rowing did compete in kind of an off-the-book scrimmage against Syracuse and Cornell. They finished in 3rd of all of their races. I frequently talk about how I don't really know how to speak to rowing. They're done until the spring unless there's some very surprising results. The only other thing I want to talk about, 2 other things. Cross country is going to Northeast Regionals. There's no real way to preview that. This is a meet they go to every year, just by virtue of being in the Northeast. Coming off of, I'm a little disappointed with the MAC championships. The women did post their best result in 10 years. In finishing 5th. Their last time they finished above that was in 2005 when they finished 4th. The men finished 6th, which was a bit of a slip. I thought both teams had runners run more slowly than I expected. Freshman runners who had been running at the front of the pack did not run at the front of the pack in the MAC championships. The men especially were kind of coming back from some nagging injuries. Those might be healthy for the NCAA regionals, which is good news. Both teams entered the regional rankings this season before the MAC championships. The women were 14th, and the men, I think, had fallen back to 12th from a season high of 9th. So there's a good look that they put together some impressive runs. Regionals used to be held in New York, but I think they're held at Franklin Park in Boston now. So there's a chance that they put something together there, and we'll talk about that next weekend briefly. The only other folks in action this coming weekend are wrestling at the Northeast duels. Those are hosted in the Albany area, and they've kind of got a mix of competition in Springfield, Lock Haven, and West Virginia. Springfield and Lock Haven are smaller schools who are D1, if not just for wrestling just a few others. Well, West Virginia is, I believe, a Big 12 program in wrestling. They might be SEC in wrestling. No, they must be Big 12. They're very good. Running through kind of the rankings, the only ranked opponent, I'm going to internet rankings that UB will see, well, not only, but at 125 of those 3, only West Virginia has a ranked. And that's Zeke Moisey, who will be a contender for a national championship at 125 this year. He's currently ranked number 3. That should be a real good match for Kyle Akins. I wouldn't expect Akins to win, but it'll be against a top-flight opponent, which is encouraging to see. I don't believe there's anyone ranked at 133. Should have been more prepared for this, but you'll have to excuse me. I would be surprised if Lock Haven has someone ranked at 141. That'll be Jason Estevez at 141. He went against, if not a ranked opponent, someone on the fringe of the rankings against Maryland and nearly won, held his own, was just a couple inches away from a key takedown. Lock Haven's Dan Neff is ranked number 10 at 141. So that'll be a real tough test for Estevez. There at 149 will probably be Colt Cotton again. Looking quickly, it doesn't look like he'll face any ranked opponents there. 157 was Tim Schaefer. He, I can't remember if he didn't take a forfeit. He had a pin or a big win against Davidson, which everybody performed well against Davidson, and then lost a high-scoring match against Maryland where he kind of got stuck running for points, and the guy kept getting points from him. West Virginia has a ranked guy, Dylan Cottrell, at 16 at 157. Getting into the higher weight is really where you'd be impressed, especially compared to last year in their opening match. I'll be really excited to see what they do with the duels. 165 is Tyler Rill, who is coming back from a real gruesome hamstring injury last season and won by forfeit and won by a real tough match over Maryland last weekend. I don't think he'll be facing anyone ranked. And as John has said in his preview, that's a weight at 165 that has no ranked wrestlers in the match. So that's wide open for Rill to not only make it to nationals by qualifying out of the MAC, but to possibly win a conference championship there. At 174, it's probably going to be Muhammad McBride again, and I don't believe there's anyone there. McBride looks really improved from last season. He looks much stronger. He's really young. He's only 18 or 19. He's a senior. He looks a lot stronger from last season. He really was not challenged at all against Maryland. It was really good to see. 184 is Joe Areola, who has come down a weight class from his beginning last season. Looks very strong at 184. I don't think he faces anyone. I'm surprised not to see more West Virginians in the rankings. It's West Virginians have won Lock Haven so far for everybody. Here at 197, James Benjamin will go up against West Virginia's Jake Smith, who's ranked number 9, and no one else. So, and then at heavyweight, he's got a redshirt freshman in Jake Gunning, who we're very excited about. He will face no one ranked. I didn't have the time to run through and see, look at everybody, each guy, and who they're going with. But so 3 ranked wrestlers from West Virginia, which I believe against Maryland, UB wrestled against 3 ranked wrestlers and one who might be ranked by now. I didn't look. So I believe that the Mountaineers will be stronger than the Terrapins, but that doesn't sound on paper like a huge step up in competition. It will be a challenge again. John tells me not to sleep on Lock Haven. As I said, they do have 1 ranked wrestler at 133, 141 for Jason Estevez. And Springfield, I don't even remember. That it would be nice to get a win there. I think we will. I wish John was on. He could preview things a little more for me. Maybe after his midterm, he pops in and says a bit. Maybe Arbor Hill writes another fan post. That would be swell. I can talk about wrestling when I see it happening. I can't necessarily talk about it on the long scale. That's everything we got. As I said, fall sports are really wrapping down. By this time next week, most likely, cross country and men's soccer will be done for the year, barring something very loud and very impressive in their respective postseasons. We'll be gearing up for volleyball's postseason, which, barring something very loud and very impressive, will be the end of their season. And we'll talk wrestling. And then by then we'll have basketball going, which we don't talk on this show, but it'll be lots more different posts on the blog. 2 weekends from now, before Thanksgiving, we'll have swimming in action, we'll have wrestling in action again. And then it really slows down headed to December. It's really just going to be shorter shows like this probably every week until things start back up again in January. So with that, thanks for watching. The few of you who are watching live, I appreciate it. Thanks to those of you who will watch in the future. A little bit of a tough weekend for UB Olympic sports after really a month of really strong showings week in and week out. At the same time, the season's got to end. And even a defeat, women's soccer, is still setting new program highs. It will be very hard, even 30 years from now, for any team to match what they did last season. It's a hard bar to set. But semifinals, 2 straight years, 27 wins over 2 years, lots of freshmen and sophomore contributors. There's a lot of good things to be excited about for women's soccer. And it's not like they got blown out. It's not like they showed that they didn't belong at the top of the MAC again this season. So, little bit of a bummer. I think others close to the program are more bummed than I am. But we'll be excited to see what they have coming forward. Men's soccer is still alive. They've got a chance to really do something. And volleyball, they could still surprise us as well. If nothing else, they're another team that we're very excited about what they put together this year. With that, I'll see you next week. We'll be talking volleyball, wrestling, and men's soccer, and some cross country as well. As always, I'm Matt Gritzmacher with UBBullRun.com. We talk all of UB sports every week at 10 on Sunday. Have a good one.